Okay, now on to our guest speaker. We all work in an industry where we are expected to make the impossible possible. This is true whether you're managing staffing challenges in a contact center, undertaking a digital transformation change management process, or providing enterprise solutions like Nuance to automate and deliver cross-channel solutions. These challenges have always been daunting, but I can't think of the time in the last decade or more when the challenge facing all of us today have been more poignant. Nuance, like most companies on this call, has set up a crisis management team to manage through this as much as possible. But it is difficult for all of us. Making the impossible possible has never been more challenging. But to give us all a little inspiration and show an example of how the impossible can be made possible, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Chris Jewell. Chris?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and welcome. In my professional life, I'm head of professional services for a large tech firm. But I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about my other passion, my other life, if you will, as a caver, cave diver, and the diving officer for the British Cave Rescue Council. It's this other life that led me to be involved in the dramatic rescue of 12 boys and their football coach from the flooded cave in Thailand in 2018. I'm going to tell you the story, the real story of what happened, the story behind the headlines, if you like, and I'm going to weave through a few themes and useful takeaways, which I believe will be relevant to you all today. And first, the background. Located in Chiang Rai province in northern Thailand, up on the Burmese border, the cave called Tam Luang means Cave of the Sleeping Lady. There's a huge catchment area here, which means there are large mountains, and those large mountains collect all the rainfall in the area, and they funnel them down to these caves. In this part of the world, there's two seasons inside the caves. There's the dry season, where it's possible to reach the furthest distances into these caves without even getting your feet wet. But during the monsoon season, which lasts for 4 or 5 months, many of these caves become completely flooded. And this transition from the dry season to the monsoon season was really key to what happened in 2018 at the entry of this rescue. On Saturday, the 23rd of June, a group of 12 boys and their football coach entered the cave. It was one of their birthdays, and one of the boys wanted to write their name on the wall of the cave as a bit of rite of passage. Now, it's known that there is a risk of flooding in this cave. Well, it certainly says it in English, and we believe that's also what it says in Thai. But it does say that the monsoon rains come from July, and the boys were in there at the end of June. But those monsoon rains are unpredictable, and they came early. And the boys who were visiting the furthest reaches of this cave were trapped inside the cave. Nothing like this had ever happened before in terms of the number of people involved and the distance which they were trapped inside the cave. It was a completely unprecedented situation, and my story this afternoon is how these boys were eventually rescued. But first, I want to share and explore some thoughts with you about high performance. Now, the analogy of competitive sport is often used in business when we talk about high performance. But I have some problems with this. Competitive sport pitches athletes at their very peak against each other. These athletes practice and train for years in some cases, just for a few minutes of actual performance in their race or competition. And they've got this huge support team around them to ensure they have the ideal conditions for success. But of course, that's not how it is in the real world, in the corporate world, and certainly not how it is in the cave diving world. I don't think high performance is about how good we are when we're at our best. Yes, sure, every single project manager, accountant, consultant, salesperson will ace a piece of work when everything aligns. When you're not tired, not overworked, haven't got any stress at home, have a great team around you. Yeah, we all do a great job because everybody is great on a good day. But that's not reality. We've all got a million and one things going on. We have stress outside of work. We have unhappy customers or colleagues who have KPIs. targets to hit, computer systems not working. There are lots of challenges, and we need to be resilient to those challenges. I actually believe that high performers are those who are still able to deliver and get the job done in these situations. And so actually, performance isn't so much about the peaks in output, like our athletes. It's about how you deal with and minimize the troughs and how you deal with adversity. And that's definitely the case in cave diving. It's about how we perform when we're tired and under pressure. It's about how we respond to adversity and still get the job done. Cave diving high performance is about motivating yourself for months and years when it's hard work and there's no glamour. It's about how you operate when you're at your limits, when you're a long way into a cave, when you're tired after multiple weeks on an expedition, how you cope with a new unfamiliar situation, how you solve problems, how you adopt and adapt new equipment, how fast you can adapt and yet still get the job done, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone but still delivering. In other words, it's not how good you are when conditions are ideal. It's about getting the job done when conditions are terrible, when you've got problems and unforeseen circumstances, when the cave is in flood, the visibility is terrible, and when you're tired, under stress and pressure. So, how is it, of all the people in the world that could have helped this UK team ended up as the spearhead in this international rescue operation? British Cave Rescue Council is the governing body for cave rescue in the UK. Cave rescue in the UK has been around since the 1960s. It's about cavers helping cavers. We are a volunteer search and rescue organisation. And for me, there are 4 key elements to why and how we ended up in Thailand. The first was the fact we had the opportunity. And like with everything, a certain amount of luck was involved. Vern Unsworth, a British caver who lives in Thailand because he has a passion for cave exploration in the area, was very quickly on the scene, and he established himself as the expert who knew this cave the best. Vern was able to recommend that the Thai authorities called in the British Cave Rescue Council. And as happens with most events of this type, it's actually the informal network which gets things done, which is swifter than those official channels. Next comes our experience of rescue operations. Now, thankfully, cave diving rescues and incidents are extremely rare. They're not normally good news as well. However, the UK team, which I'm part of, has the experience of being called out on foreign rescues. And the point I'm making is that we have established procedures, protocols, and mechanism for being able to deploy overseas very rapidly. And thirdly, we have the capability to dive and operate in these sorts of conditions. Underwater, often with no visibility, through sometimes constricted passages whilst transporting equipment. And we have this capability from years of exploring caves. So actually, diving these kind of conditions was business as usual. Swimming to the end of the cave where the boys were was within our comfort zone. Yes, clearly, bringing the boys out was a complete step up in terms of complexity and difficulty. We're used to what I call expedition conditions, being part of a large team, being goal-driven, self-motivated, and having the ability to solve problems, being agile in thought and having the ability to adapt and improvise, and our ability to break down the operation over multiple days. The picture I'm trying to paint to you is not of people who train for cave diving rescues, but of divers who explore underwater caves as a hobby, but who could adapt those skills to make a difference. We're able to take one set of skills and experiences and adapt them and apply them to a completely new and unprecedented situation. And these capabilities come from many years of doing the sport of cave diving and being a member of the Cave Diving Group. Cave Diving Group is the oldest recreational diving club in the world. And it's a unique organisation in the way in which it places its approach to this sport and emphasises the right attitude and mindset over skills or technical abilities. The Cave Diving Group, it encourages experimentation, innovation and improvisation. All caves are different, and exploration requires continual problem solving. So we have this very unique club, this group where it's okay to suggest unconventional ideas and try new things. The only thing which matters inside the cave diving group is getting the job done, and there are no points for style. Now you might have the opportunity, you might have the experience, and you might have the capability. But even so, we learned you still need to establish credibility. When the first 3 members of our team arrived on site in Thailand, they were not automatically accepted or necessarily wanted by those in charge. There were lots of other experts competing for attention in the middle of a hectic situation under lots of media focus. And it was actually very hard for our team to establish themselves with the Thai military. The conventional emergency response was seen in groups like the US military, who turned up with a large contingent of military personnel, nearly 40 of them, signalers, press people, everybody looking smart, professional, controlled. Team UK had 3 slightly scruffy cave divers in shorts and t-shirts, and we were in the corner of a storeroom being driven around in the back of an open pickup. So it was hard for Team UK to be accepted. In order to be effective, Team UK needed, therefore, to work very closely with the other groups also deployed. The US military were highly respected by the Thai military. And in turn, the US team developed a really close working relationship with the UK divers, which enabled the first 3 members of our team, Rick, John, and Rob, to be effective in the operation. There are also some other international divers, diving instructors, living and working in Thailand, who deployed and were taken under the wing of the Thai Navy SEALs. We hadn't worked with these divers before. We were able to instruct them and give them progressively more difficult tasks to complete in the cave. And as they proved themselves, we were able to incorporate them further into the rescue plans. And finally, when Rick and John took this video, the story became truly international, with these images being beamed all around the world. Rick and John swam into the cave with the purpose of filming some of the underwater junctions. They swam out, having found the boys, and using the camera they'd taken to provide proof of life to the Thai authorities. What Rick and John didn't realise is that when the Thai military had installed fibre optic cable into the cave to the advanced dive base, and when Rick and John handed the GoPro over to the Thai military, these images were very quickly put on Facebook and broadcast around the world. And whilst the world celebrated the amazing achievement of locating these boys who were well and unharmed and in good spirits, the cave diving and caving communities involved in the rescue were absolutely horrified. How on earth could we possibly bring boys out from a place inside a cave this remote? Rick and John, two of the best cave divers in the world, described this as a gnarly cave dive just to reach them. It was clear we had a very difficult rescue ahead of us. Back in the UK, all hell broke loose. The British Cave Rescue Council is a tiny charity staffed by volunteers, and suddenly every media outlet on the globe wanted to speak to us. We all volunteers with day jobs, but suddenly we were very much in demand. And we were trying to both assist and coordinate the rescue efforts out in Thailand, as well as field these media inquiries. I was actually in contact with Rick and John throughout the early part of the rescue, and I was up one morning early giving a Skype interview to an international news agency. I'm in the bottom right-hand corner on that Skype interview. And in that early morning interview, I had my phone with me. And during that very interview, I had a text message from John out in Thailand saying, "Chris, the situation has changed out here. We're being asked to put together a plan to bring out the boys. We need more divers, we need you, and you need Jason." So we flew out to Thailand that evening, and we took absolutely everything. We flew with 350 kilos of baggage. Don't worry, there was no excess baggage charge. But we also wanted to try and enter the country without drawing too much attention to ourselves. We managed to get through Heathrow relatively easily. When we arrived in Thailand, everybody seemed to know we were coming. And it's only when I subsequently came back to the UK and put together my presentation that I found the image on the left-hand side of the screen, which is from Thai television. And you might notice at the bottom of the screen, there are some flight details. There are our flight details from Heathrow. So despite our best efforts, everybody in Thailand knew we were coming. At the same point, we also brought out 3 other members of the British Cave Rescue Council, 3 managers, 3 surface controllers to assist us in the operation. Prior to these 3 joining the team, we had discovered that we spent an awful lot of time discussing, coordinating, and planning the rescue operations, and we needed extra personnel out in Thailand so that we could really put together a strong team to make this all happen. Just take a minute to talk about risk. I know risk is a topic which is close to many of our hearts, and it's a really important topic to consider in cave diving. Now, despite what you may be thinking, cave divers are actually quite risk averse. No, we're not adrenaline junkies. And I will quote something that we said to the British Prime Minister when we came back. We had the privilege of meeting the British Prime Minister. Well, we met Theresa May, so I'll let you make your own judgment over that. We met Theresa May in the UK afterwards, and we said to her, actually, we don't want cave diving to be exciting. We actually quite like it to be boring, because we like to have a plan and dive to the plan. And it's excitement when things go wrong. Let's have a plan and let's execute it. And cave diving is all about managing risk. However, we don't just look to reduce risk, we look to understand risk. And the question, therefore, I like is not how can I simply reduce risk and minimize it, but how can I increase my chance of success? In that measure of success, I mean coming out alive and getting the job done. And in this specific case, obviously bringing the boys out alive as well. And when we're operating in a hazardous environment, in my case, underwater in a cave, we're balancing our exposure to risk against our operational effectiveness. Now, in cave diving, we always ensure we have complete redundancy. 2 sets of cylinders, 3 lights, multiple devices for cutting us out of entanglements, and so on. But why not take 3 or 4 sets of everything? You know, cave divers could create all sorts of additional procedures, take all sorts of additional equipment to reduce the risk to ourselves, and in this case, the boys. But in doing so, we'd actually introduce complexity and time delays, which would then impact our chance of a successful rescue. Now, understanding that in this case, we're volunteers and we're able to make these choices for ourselves, we're able to ask ourselves, what can we do to increase the chances of a successful mission where we come out in one piece and we get the job done? And coming up with that viable plan, that strategy, was not easy. There were no good options, no clear solution, and then we were operating within a time constraint. There was what I call a weather window. The weather had been very bad in Thailand when the first 3 members of our team arrived, and it was only when the rains had stopped, albeit briefly, that diving in the cave was even possible. As cave divers, we're used to problem solving, and we had to develop a strategy within the wider group, within the wider organisation that represented the rescue, whilst collaborating, innovating, and solving this problem with lots of stakeholders and lots of input. So what are the possible solutions? One solution that people were looking at was whether we could find another way into the cave to bring the boys out. People scoured the mountainside to look for alternative cave entrances. We even considered the possibility of drilling straight down to bring the boys out. After all, that's how they brought the Chilean miners out. The problem here is that the boys were deep inside the mountain, 600 or 700 meters below the surface, and there were no accurate surveys or maps that could locate that tiny chamber deep inside the mountain. And so drilling shafts, drilling into the mountain would have been very time consuming trying to locate that tiny chamber. What about pumping? Maybe we could deploy some technology here. Perhaps we could use these incredible pumps to shift water. These pumps in the picture are effectively big HGV engines connected to a large Archimedes screw. And they shifted a phenomenal amount of water. It was really impressive. And yes, we believe it had some benefits, but ultimately it was never going to lower the water level in the cave. And to understand that, you need to consider what happens when a cave is flooded or contains water. If you put a pump in the first kind of U-bend in the picture here, you can imagine that when you turn that pump on, you can very quickly take all the water out, but you're not going to affect the water level further back in the cave. Also, what about leaving the boys in? The monsoon season would last for 3 or 4 months. If the boys could be supplied, could they stay in that cave for 3 or 4 months until the water level naturally lowered? We did take in some supplies for the boys, but we really didn't believe we could take in enough supplies to last that amount of time. We also didn't believe that the quality of the air inside that chamber would be good enough for the boys to survive for that duration. So then, what about diving them out? Despite what was written in the media at the time, we did not spend many days inside the cave teaching the boys to swim or to dive. This was a difficult, gnarly cave dive, and it was unrealistic to think these boys could acquire that skill in such a short space of time. And if we did try to dive them out, that would be extremely high risk, not just to the boys, but also to ourselves as the rescuers. And so, the idea of sedating the children was explored. The idea behind sedation was to remove the risk of panic and remove the need to teach the boys how to dive, therefore increasing our chance of success. When I talk about sedation, I do mean effectively the boys falling asleep inside the cave and waking up in hospital back on the surface. Fortunately, we knew a couple of cave divers who could assist us in this matter. Craig Challen on the left of your picture, Richard Harris on the right. Dr. Richard Harris is an anaesthetist, and we had previous experience of working with Dr. Harris in cave diving expeditions. Both cave divers from Australia, and my colleague Rick Stanton sent Harry a message. He said, "Harry, do you think you could sedate these children and bring them out of the cave?" Harry replied, "No way." Rick texted him back, "Harry, if we don't do something, these boys will die." Harry's response was to say, "Maybe." Rick said, "Harry, that's not good enough. Will you come and will you try this?" And we now know that Harry came to Thailand really not believing that this would ever be attempted, not believing that this would be reasonable to do in terms of risk versus benefit, but prepared to come and have a look at the situation for himself. Conveniently, the chap on the left is also medically trained. He's an animal doctor, veterinarian. He's our next most experienced medical member of our rescue team. But in all seriousness, cave diving medical experts are pretty rare. And so it fell to these two chaps to give us the skills, knowledge and training to safely administer sedatives as we exited the cave. So we had to adapt, learn a new skill and very quickly put it into practice. To make this possible and to increase our chance of success, we wanted to bring them out using a specialist piece of equipment called a positive pressure full face mask. This mask fully encloses your face, which prevents water getting in. So if you knock this mask whilst you're swimming through a flooded cave, rather than water trickle in, actually air will simply come out. We also decided that the boys would breathe on pure oxygen. Divers don't normally breathe pure oxygen when they go underwater. We normally breathe compressed air, but in this case, we gave the boys pure oxygen. That was because it would be more likely that they would be able to be resuscitated successfully if something went wrong, therefore increasing our chance of success. And to make this whole thing work, we needed a diving system and equipment configuration transporting the boys out of the cave. We learned on this rescue that this was the sort of situation where effectively money was no object. We could have asked for any piece of equipment from anywhere in the world and it would be sent to us. People were that keen to help us. But we realised, after asking for some items, that the difficulties and delays in getting the right piece of equipment to us in a time-efficient and speedy manner was such that it was better for us to be able to use, adapt and improvise the equipment that was readily at hand. We had swimmer's vests, which is the black item on the left of your picture. These are military swimmer's vests that the Thai SEALs were using. And by using these and combining them with some readily available zip ties or cable ties and bungee cord that you can see on the right there, we were able to come up with a rig and equipment configuration for putting the boys in. And this is what we came up with. Each of the boys had a cylinder mounted onto their chest, the front of their chest. We had them in that buoyancy vest from the last picture. We had them in the full face mask I talked about. And we used the zip ties and the bungee to attach it all and make it the right size for the children. We had one diver underwater with just one of the boys. There was no advantage in having multiple people underwater in these zero visibility caves. We had no stretchers. We had no additional bits of equipment which would create additional drag and cause complications. We wanted a system which was as slick, efficient and streamlined as possible. Now, I said this situation, this configuration, this equipment, everything was completely unprecedented. We had never tried this before. And so we wanted to rehearse the strategy. We went to a local swimming pool and some Thai boys volunteered to be our test subjects. Some boys who were part of a local swimming team. We dressed them up in the same equipment we planned to take into the cave. We didn't sedate these children. But we put them in exactly the same equipment and had a dress rehearsal, if you like, around the swimming pool. We did that to prove to ourselves that the technique would work. But we also realised that throughout the practice session, the Thai authorities were watching our actions very, very carefully and assessing us as the cave divers to see that they were confident that we should try and go ahead and conduct this rescue. And at this point, we had described our strategy to the Thais as having a high probability of multiple fatalities. And understandably, they were very nervous about giving us the green light to go ahead. We felt we needed to do this to protect ourselves because we really did believe there would be fatalities. And when we discussed the rescue mission with the commander of the US military division that was deployed, we said to him, "What do you think success looks like in this rescue mission?" And his answer was, "If you can bring out one alive, that is success." The situation was really regarded as this desperate. And whilst we believed this rescue attempt, this strategy we'd come up with, was the best chance of getting the boys out alive, we never believed, or we weren't convinced, that the ties would give us the green light to go ahead of this, because of the risk involved. We know that many people were looking for a zero risk approach, which simply wasn't practical. And under immense media scrutiny, it took some brave politicians and leaders to authorize this and actually pass it up the chain of command all the way to the King of Thailand, who finally gave us the go-ahead. At this point, we brought in some additional personnel. These three gentlemen flew in from the UK very quickly. They actually arrived on site at the cave in Thailand the morning of the first day of rescue. They got straight off their minibus, put their wetsuits on, and came straight into the cave. No time for practice, preparation, or anything else. Straight into the cave, straight into the mission. In order to conduct this operation, we had the support of a large number of personnel on the surface. Something like 200 diving cylinders were filled and carried into the cave, into Chamber 3, the advanced base operation. And a huge army of people, including Thai military personnel, US military and Australian police, all worked to make this possible. Got a bit of a schematic here of the cave to talk you through what we did. Up on the top right is the cave entrance, and on the bottom left is the chamber where the boys were located. It's about, somewhere just across the left there, where it says Chamber 3 as we zoom in, was where diving started. From Chamber 3 to the end of the cave was about 1.5 kilometers in distance. Half of this distance was completely submerged, and half of the time was swimming on the surface of an underground river. At the end of the cave are the Thai children, but also 4 Thai Navy SEALs who've gone in to assist. Every day, Dr. Richard Harris would go into the cave, accompanied by 4 main British cave divers, John Blanton, Rick Stanton, myself, and Jason Mallinson. Every day, one of us would take one of the Thai boys and begin to swim with them out of the cave. As we exit the cave, we've got a series of, if I want to call them, pit stops, places or locations in the cave where we have colleagues waiting to assist us. In these pit stops, our colleagues can assist us by giving us fresh supplies of breathing gas, and also change out the breathing gas, the oxygen in this case, that the boys were breathing. In some cases, we needed to put the boys in a stretcher very briefly to transport them over some rocky ground before getting them back into the water. It was also the case that the sedative, the ketamine that the boys had been given to put them under, would wear off after about 40 to 50 minutes. It was taking us something like 3 hours to get out of the cave, so it was necessary for the divers, either those of us carrying the boys or our colleagues in our pit stops, to re-administer the ketamine multiple times throughout the journey out of the cave. The water was relatively warm, about 19 degrees Celsius, which really helped to make this possible, and it was relatively shallow, only down to about 5 meters depth at the deepest point. And both of those factors meant this strategy, this technique, was effective and worked very well. If the cave had been deeper, if the water had been much colder, we would have faced severe difficulties. When we get back to Chamber 3 with the children, we're able to hand them over to the Thai military, the US military, who conducted the evacuation through the final section of the cave. And at this point, the, I suppose, traditional cave rescue techniques took over. This is where the rope work, the stretcher carries, everything that traditional cave rescue or kind of mountain rescue would use to bring. And all the images like this one from the news, from the media at the time, are actually taken after the diving has finished. This chap's in a wetsuit and he's got a mask there, but he's not been diving. And if you see any images like this, it's been taken after the passage has been navigated through. At the end of day one, it was quite amazing. We didn't believe we would get total success. We got lots of applause, lots of people in the cave wanted to shake our hands and pat us on the back. At the end of day one, we knew we weren't even halfway through. We had to do this at least twice more. And what's more than that is that now we'd proven the strategy worked, now we'd proven the technique worked, it meant that any mistakes would suddenly become very personal. If something went wrong, it would be down to a mistake made by one of us, the cave divers, exiting the cave. So day two was an exact rerun of day one. Same roles, same responsibilities, kind of minor tweaks, but effectively, when a good strategy works, you keep doing it. And day two worked just like day one. And we learned as well, it was very important for us at this point to be able to get in early to the cave, carry out the rescue mission, get out of the cave, rest, recover, recuperate, try and sleep well so that we were fit and able and prepared to go into the cave and do it all again the following day. As we headed into day three, we actually felt the weather window was closing. I remember the Thai authorities asking us whether we wanted a rest day, a day off, chance to recover. We knew that the weather window, the opportunity to bring these boys out, was disappearing quickly. We wanted to get this rescue over and done with. As we headed into the cave that day, we knew it had rained very heavily overnight, and we were all apprehensive about the cave going into flash flood. Luckily, and we found out subsequently, that a lot of efforts being made on the surface, on the mountain range above us to divert the water, meant that although the water levels on the surface were rising, that water was not being routed into the cave. And ultimately, as you all know, we were successful in bringing those boys out. Finally, the boys came out of the cave. We had this photo taken in chamber 3. I'm not normally very emotional, but I might have hugged a few of my colleagues. For some reason, somebody managed to produce a bottle of Jack Daniels at this point, so we're able to celebrate a little bit. One of the boys had also been writing notes to their parents throughout the rescue operation. One of those notes had actually said one of the boys was really looking forward to KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, when they came out. KFC obviously heard about this and had sent lots of buckets of chicken to the cave. And so here we are inside the cave, drinking a little bit of Jack Daniels and eating some KFC while celebrating. We exited the cave, we met some of the parents. That was also, as you imagine, an emotional experience. And then finally, we waited for the rest of the rescue team to leave the cave before we could really relax and celebrate for a job well done. My last slide is a cartoon. It was drawn at the time, it appeared in the medium in Thailand. It symbolises teamwork with different nationalities represented by different animals. And it was a huge international effort to make this possible. Lots of disparate organisations and cultures came together. Politicians made incredibly difficult decisions. And whilst there were a lot of difficulties, we were able to adapt, to overcome, and to achieve this, I think, incredible result. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Wow. Okay. We shake hands after that. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Wow. Well, making the impossible possible. I'm almost lost for words. When I see what's going on with the COVID-19 descending upon us and causing havoc, and how we're all reacting and making the best of the situation, you hear a story like that and realize whatever the circumstance, come out of it ahead. And so thank you for that inspirational speech, Chris. Now, there's probably only one man in the world who could follow up a presentation like that. And that is our EVP and General Manager of our Enterprise Division, Robert Wiedemann, who is going to talk to us about dealing with the accelerated pace of change. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Scott, and special thanks to Chris. We all had gripping attention on the Thai rescue as it was happening, and to have somebody on the team and actually see behind the scenes what was going on is even more gripping. And it shows how important it is that when we're confronted with what seems like impossible tasks, impossible odds, coming together as a team makes all the difference. Can you go to the next slide, please? And a big part of that is to take a step back and get yourself and the team in a mindset on how we're going to accomplish these challenging tasks. And that includes being able to manage the risk, critically important to stay agile and to foster cooperation, including cooperation that in your organization perhaps hasn't been even done in the past or has been challenging in the past. Go next. And in our environment, as professionals responsible for improving the customer engagement with all of our customers and to integrating very complicated technologies in order to accomplish that, it's been a challenge for more than 20 years. All of us have been implementing some form of digital transformation in our organizations as technology has advanced. Nuance was the first to actually deliver automation in the voice channel with speech recognition, text-to-speech, and eventually NLU and dialogue. But as channels exploded with the advent of the internet in '94, the pressures to support more and more channels grew. And that was viewed as an opportunity, but the challenge that created for all of us is that while we turned on a website to accept web forms, while we supported email, as social networks came into play, handling the increased volume in the digital channel became more and more challenging, especially since voice wasn't declining. In fact, during this period of time, it was increasing. And so organizations attacked that increased volume of engagement by implementing things like live chat, eventually async messaging, moving agents offshore to get more hands for the same money. But it wasn't really in 2012, 2013, with the advent of neural networks, of which Nuance was a part in bringing into the market, did things start to really improve and enable much more intelligent engagement. Can you advance the slide? What neural nets provided is a very scalable and rapid way to implement automation. And in 2012, we launched Nina, the first virtual assistant based on neural networks, leveraging conversational AI. And the whole point of an AI effort in conjunction with digital transformation is to automate completely as much of the engagement as possible, not just for the customer, but also for the agent. So what you'll be hearing about today is how AI transformation coupled with digital transformation allows us to take advantage of digital channels in ways that wasn't possible prior to 2012, 2013. Through virtual assistants, through agent AI technologies, and then moving more and more into technologies that automatically do things just by listening to conversations between an agent and a customer through text and through voice channels. Go next, please. And you'll see the solutions here, but I wanted to give a couple of customer examples. We had a customer in 2012 that was the first company to deploy a neural net VA based on Nina. They'd been a longtime IVR customer. and had very high volumes in their contact center. The timeline below represents weeks of time. I'm sorry, it's months of time. And you can see that they implemented the VA initially in their mobile app very early on, enabling voice and text input to that mobile app VA. Over time, they added it to other channels. Then they did something interesting. They actually reorganized to bring the IVR group and the digital group together and accelerated the deployment of the VA across all their digital channels. And you can see as they progressed, they were able to increase the number of fully automated engagements using AI. And you can see at about the halfway point, the trend line for voice calls handled by live agents started to decline. And this is exactly the picture that they wanted to get to. This particular organization scores the highest in their industry in NPS consistently. And they believe in, at least for now, to automate first, digital first, and then handle escalations and VIP or troubled customers through the voice channel. Now, this is a customer that's been doing this for approaching 15 years with us. But more recently, if we go to the next slide, we can see a customer that had live chat. They also have voice. The live chat implementation that they had wasn't working for them. And they were really looking to have an integrated live engagement, async engagement, and virtual assistant capability all in one integrated solution. So we deployed this very quickly for them, very, very high volumes, millions of contacts a month. And you can see very quickly after deploying the virtual assistant, we've gotten to a higher number of engagements automatically handled by the AI as compared to engagements that have to go to the agent. And even those engagements have a reduced agent handling time because of the agent AI proposing answers to the agent based on the conversation that's going on. And so this is two examples of customers that have pursued the combination of enhancing their voice channel, implementing digital engagement, and overlaying both of those with AI transformation. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the importance of this. There will always be voice channels, not only because there will always be phone calls made into a contact center, but if you own a smart speaker, if you own a car and engage in the car, there are places where voice is going to be the only and or the preferred way to engage. And so the importance is, if you could animate to the next, the importance is that you have an investment, a single brain that captures your intents, captures the dialogues, captures the self-service, has intelligent routing and agent-assisted capabilities that allow you to handle those independent of where they're coming from, whether somebody's speaking to a system or they're texting, typing into a system. And that results in, animate one more please, that results in the ability to lower your cost of deployment, to deliver a more consistent experience across your voice and text channels wherever they may be and wherever they may become. And as a result of that, improve your CSAT for your customers, and reduce your costs, increase revenue, and all the while overlaying a level of security that matches whether it's in the voice channel or the digital channel. So we are very excited in what's happened in the industry, especially since 2012, and to have been a part of it since the beginning. And it's really changed all of our jobs. And a big part of that is identifying and understanding what the challenge is, what are the goals of the organization, bringing together the right team, and having your own cave diver expert, your own anesthesiologist, your own surface planner, to be able to bring these things together quickly to the benefit of your organization and, more importantly, to the benefit of your customers. And so, go next, please. And so we're going to get into some detail here, and I'm pleased to to preview, we've got Brett Brannick, who leads our security and biometrics business around the world, actually in the UK at the moment, along with Seb Reeve, who's one of our more senior leaders in our innovation and transformation efforts around the world. And so with that, I'd like to hand this off to Brett.
Thanks, Robert. And so we set a framework, or Robert set a framework on some of the key ingredients that are required to deliver great customer care, especially in this evolving world where digital is becoming much more predominant. You know, thinking about what Scott was mentioning at the beginning of this presentation, some of these situations that we're currently living with individuals being asked to work from home increasingly, we can see that those digital channels will be solicited a bit more, and we can also think about how individuals may not be walking into branches and may contact the contact center more frequently, and so we need to adapt to some of these changing conditions. So we have three key ingredients that we want to present to you, both Seb and I, on how we think the customer care industry needs to adapt to these changing conditions, both the longer term transformation on the digital side and more these short-term transformations. And we wanted to start off by highlighting some of the experience challenges that customers face in somewhat of a humorous fashion. And there's nothing really humorous about it if we think about some of the failings that we've seen in the customer care industry. But you know, this video that we're going to play in a minute or so hopefully exemplifies all the things that we should not be doing, and then we can focus on the key steps that we should be taking to deliver customer care. So let's play the video. All right, so my marketing colleagues just informed me that the audio wasn't actually coming through. So unfortunately, that video didn't have the intended effect. We'll be more than happy to send you a link to the video so that you can see it afterwards. It is quite humorous. But fundamentally, let me just recap it in 30 seconds. So that very handsome actor that you saw in that video was just highlighting a call into a contact center and disputing a charge, and having to go through a very onerous identification and verification process, entering multi-digit ID, followed by providing a PIN, followed then by being transferred to an agent and having to answer several security questions, and then once speaking to the agent, being transferred to another agent. And so you can imagine that that kind of experience is extremely frustrating, and that's what we were trying to highlight. Now, although the video is quite humorous, and I really do encourage you to watch it afterwards, unfortunately, many organizations still have at least some elements of that experience that are still present in their customer care channels. And so these are the three fundamental principles that we'd like to communicate to you today, right? And what we should be doing in all of our in all of our customer care channels and designing all of the experiences. So one is to make security invisible. So having to go through an overt authentication process, having to go through an overt identification process is cumbersome. It creates friction and it creates a potential failure point. So Nuance strongly believes, and I'm a key proponent of this, is that security needs to be robust. We need to manage risk, and there are very compelling and very effective technologies that can help you deliver that. But at the same time, it needs to be completely transparent to the customer. The other key principle is that we believe in channel-less customer engagement. And Seb is going to go into a little bit more detail on what we mean by that. But really, the principle that each channel is managed by a different silo within an organization, and that it's completely disconnected from one to the other, is what we're trying to avoid. And the last key principle is that agents should be a trusted advisor and not just going through a robotic process and putting you through a tedious, basically form-filling, step-by-step process, as we showcased in the video, which you didn't see. But you can imagine, think back to some of the customer care experiences that you've had over the last couple of months or last couple of years, and I'm sure you can think of a situation where you were speaking or you were interacting with an agent and you felt that that agent was really not trying their best to be helpful and they were just going through a step-by-step robotic process. So let's talk about security. So as Robert mentioned, I lead the security biometrics division at Nuance, and in my job I have the opportunity to work with our research team and our engineering team and develop really powerful technologies to, on the one hand, authenticate customers using biometrics, but on the other hand, also detect fraudsters and prevent them from perpetrating fraud. Very early on in our journey, we realized that for security to be effective, it not only had to be very robust purely from a security perspective, but also had to deliver a better customer experience than whatever legacy authentication methods were being used. And if we think about the contact center, typically, if you're using live chat, you're interacting with a live chat agent. At some point in time in that interaction, that agent will ask you to enter a username and password, really disrupting that flow of that engagement and potentially asking you to enter a password that you've long forgotten. And then that creates a significant and material disruption in that customer experience. Or if you're speaking to a customer care agent, that customer care agent is probably going to ask you several security questions that you may not have the answers to. And so our argument is to make security completely transparent and visible using biometrics. And so I'd like to talk about one of our customers, Fidelity Investments, that has really exemplified this core principle. And so a few years ago, they deployed our voice biometric solution, so Security Suite, in their contact center. And they simplified the authentication process. So when a customer would call in, they would be speaking to an agent, and while they're explaining their call intent, the authentication would be done completely transparently, in a completely invisible manner to the caller. And using voice biometrics, the agent would receive a notification on their screen that the caller's been successfully authenticated. That has delivered very transformational results for Fidelity, reducing their average handling time by 89 seconds, which you can translate into cost savings. That was quite material. But it also transformed that customer experience. Because the customer, when they call in, they start explaining their call intent, the customer care agent can start servicing that customer immediately, delivering a much better customer experience. Now, Fidelity's also reported significant reductions in fraud by using the fraud capabilities, proactively looking for fraudsters that may be calling into the contact center. And so that's been very effective for them. But this deployment was done in the contact center when a caller was speaking with an agent. There are many callers that were contained in the IVR. And so what Fidelity did, which was quite innovative, was to expand that solution into the IVR. And so today, when you call into the Fidelity IVR, you can have that same completely transparent, completely seamless authentication. So when you call in, you simply speak your content and you're authenticated that way. And so to exemplify how that works, I'm going to pick up my cell phone here and I'm going to place a call, not to Fidelity, but into our demo system that really has the same customer care experience where we're using our natural language understanding engine to understand the call intent. And we're using our Lightning engine, which is our latest voice biometric engine, which allows us to authenticate an individual with as little as half a second of audio. So I'm going to call in and go through that experience.
How can I help you today? You can say, "Here's my account balance," or "I'd like to check my last transaction."
Yes, hello. I'd like to check my last transaction, please.
Okay, Mr. Veronik, you've been authenticated. Your last transaction was a $500 payment to your credit card from your savings account.
So that interaction seemed extremely simple. And usually when I show that demo to customers, they realize that that's how the IVR experience always should have been. Very simple, effective, and fast. Unfortunately, many of the IVR experiences that exist today are far from that experience. But the technology exists today, as Fidelity has exemplified it, to deliver that experience in a completely seamless and transparent way from an authentication perspective, but also deliver on many of the questions and the transactions that customers want to make. Fundamentally, if you look at your contact center, a very large proportion of those interactions are quite simple in nature and can be done in self-service, as Robert mentioned, whether we're talking about an IVR or in digital channels with a virtual assistant. So now I'll hand things over to Seb, who will take us through the next two fundamental principles that we believe are essential in delivering great customer care. Seb?
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone. I think you can all agree, I hope you can all agree, you can see how security plays a very active role in bringing down the friction or the effort for a customer when dealing with a brand, when dealing with a service experience. And that's kind of really the gateway to service. I want to touch on another area of friction, really, and that's channels. We're offering more and more choice to consumers today than ever before, and that's only increasing. And that's a good thing. Customers do demand choice from the brands they do business with, but also that comes at a cost when we get things wrong or we're not providing consistent service to those consumers. So the cost comes in the form of measurable loyalty reduction. So the figure often cited in the industry is about a 10% reduction in loyalty when a customer's forced to move channel and it wasn't really their decision based on the process or a failing within the initial channel of choice. So it's pretty clear there's a lot of work we need to do here in terms of staying agile, providing that kind of choice to consumers, but doing so in the right way. And this theme really for us, and this innovation and investment really for us, is about making the omni-channel, the cross-channel view of the brand much more adaptable. So you do allow the consumer to communicate with the brand on the channel of choice, be that live chat, web, phone, or another device, or messaging, for example. But ensuring that those experiences are increasingly interconnected. So when customers do have to move, that's actually less frictionful and they can move more seamlessly without losing the context of the work they've already done in the channel of choice. So if they do need to escalate and they do need to move to a different channel, the data goes with them and we can actually keep the identity of the customer alive. We work very hard using biometrics or security methods to understand and verify who the customer is. So actually keeping that context is then incredibly important so we don't incur that 10% loyalty loss when that happens. And consumers then sort of react really positively to that. The other thing really there is to also make that channel experience more meaningful and the cross-channel experience more meaningful. And what I mean by that is the need to leverage history and other data about the consumer. So that context and consistency is enriched through the process as well. And also we can use all of that information to start to predict behavior or predict need ahead of time. So using things like AI to predict intent and maybe then get ahead of the user's need and be more proactive with the user and offer an experience that actually requires them to put less effort and less input into the process. So when we do that, we know we radically do increase sentiment of the user through the journey. So it's really important we're managing that in a channel-less way. And of course, we don't mean channel-less means no channels. We mean that consumers should perceive the need to decide which channel less, because they're more consistent over the course of their interaction across those channels. And the third topic, which is really key for us, is as we move into this world of AI and we move into the world where automation is really increasingly used and it's adding a huge amount more value, it's really important that we don't forget the experts. You know, going back to Chris's story earlier on about the need for experts and agility of those experts and building a team, that's not going away anytime soon. We have most businesses, we have a large team of expertise which are serving customers every day. They're a rich source of learning. And they're trusted by the consumer to provide the kinds of service they're looking for. But we also need to help them more. So taking the same technologies we're putting into automating interactions using virtual assist and conversational AI solutions, and then actually giving experiences to the agent as well. So we're using the similar kinds of techniques to predict ahead of time and help the agent to actually predict what may be needed to answer the call. Also to help them personalize the interaction more, to suggest products and services would increase relevance to that user, and also to make them more knowledgeable, so to bring information at the right time to those users so they can answer the need of the customer in a better way. So really we're balancing these two objectives. We're automating more using machine learning and AI technologies, but we're also ensuring that the experts in your business are assisted so they can do a better job as well. So that's really key. When we then look across the engagement, we can apply these kinds of intelligent engagement techniques throughout the life cycle with the customer, all the way through to increased targeting and proactivity, through to automated ID&V, as Brett talked about, across the virtual live messaging and interaction, both with a machine and with a person, and escalation to live voice and video as needed. So for us, intelligent engagement really involves bringing together all of those and coordinating all of those experiences into a more cohesive journey for consumers. We haven't had much success with videos so far, so I'm going to give it a go, and I'll cut short if it's not working. But we really wanted to play with you now and what the experience of the future should look like, you know, given everything we've discussed already today. Okay, so it appears the success is continued, and we're consistent if nothing else. And we've talked endlessly today about being agile and reacting to the situation given. We're going to have to continue doing that, albeit I'm feeling a little bit more secure than someone in a cave full of water with a flimsy gyro in the dark. But let's talk about milestones and what we've achieved already. And we'll share, of course, that video with you after the event so you can peruse that at your leisure. Some of the key milestones we've achieved so far, I'm going to hand actually back to Brett very briefly so he can talk about the first one. We've launched a really innovative solution called Gatekeeper.
Thanks, Ed. So Gatekeeper has been a tremendous effort on our part that we've been working on for the last few years, and that we successfully launched at the end of 2019. And it was basically refactoring our solution to make it cloud ready and cloud first and cloud native. And what that's allowed us to do is to deliver technology to our customers much more effectively and much more rapidly, ensuring that our customers are staying ahead of fraudsters at all times. And so this is actually going to be the topic of one of our follow-up webinars that we're going to be communicating with you in the future. Seth?
Thanks, Brett. Following on from that innovation, we've also launched a range of APIs to make our technology more easily consumable by you, both in piece part form, so consuming things like speech recognition and language understanding as an API, but also we plan to expand that range of APIs to include sort of more solution elements like chat and messaging, etc. in the future as well. And so that's really important, so you can actually start to create the solutions based on what your customers specifically are asking for. And that's in addition to the fully fledged solutions we already offer. So it's really giving you choice in terms of how you consume our technologies and how you innovate with us. We've launched the beta for Mix, and we continue the launch of Mix, which is our tooling interface, to allow really an expert who in your business who might not have the experience of using AI and machine learning technologies to actually create really robust client-facing applications for both text-based sort of chatbot and virtual assistant technologies, as well as speech-based IVR and IoT devices like Alexa and Google Home, and create not only the understanding engine and the natural language understanding, but also the dialogue to create conversations that customers really actively can use and opt into. So we're in beta there. That's really exciting. We've been getting great feedback from early adopter customers in that space. And we'll talk in a second about launching and the launch window for launching that further. We've also launched messaging as asynchronous messaging, and that's really key because it's enabling customers to contact you in a time of their choosing. So we're all really used to now using messaging in our smart devices where the history is maintained over time, and you can come back to a conversation to message someone and add to the conversation when you need to. So we're providing that to you, the brand, so you can provide that to your consumers. And really, we recommend that's really so consumers can make the choice. You know, consumers won't thank you if you wait and make them wait, but they really want the flexibility to contact you in their own time. So async messaging has been really well received, really exciting, and initial deployments there have gleaned some considerable results in terms of customer satisfaction upside and efficiency. And we'll be expanding that asynchronous messaging across channels. We've launched Apple Business Chat already. We're in beta for WhatsApp and just going into launch for WhatsApp, and also as well as traditional channels like SMS. And we can offer asynchronous messaging on the web as well. And we've also begun the launch of what we call Agent AI. So there's a lot more to come, and we'll talk about that in a second there. Agent AI is really that third principle I talked to, where we're bringing machine learning down to the experts in the contact center so it can suggest and help them find the knowledge and predict ahead what products and services they may offer to consumers to help in that journey. So that's incredibly exciting. Also here in the UK, we've expanded our cloud IVR. We've been offering a cloud-based IVR solution at scale in the United States of America for some time, and we've expanded that globally. So here in the UK was really the next deployment of that, and we're continuing to expand that across the world as well. And also we plan the expansion of our proactive engagement solution, which is all about really reaching out to consumers before they reach into you. So enabling you to use data to understand who to contact, how to contact them, and also what medium to actually get meaningful results in terms of what those users need to do. So really exciting milestones so far. But we're not stopping there, of course, and we'll continue to innovate moving forwards. So this year in 2020, we're adding, as I said earlier, formally going to launch Nuance Mix into production over the coming months. And that will also be then expanded from creating virtual assistants to becoming really the front end for many channels. So you can configure both live and virtual assistants across all of the channels we're discussing so far. And we're adding more channels this year already. So things like integrating the TV experience, which we already provide, into the customer service experience. So TV becomes a touch point for service for any users. And you can engage on those channels, as well as WhatsApp I mentioned earlier, which has really been demanded by a lot of you actually over the last year or so. So we're really excited by that. Moving into 21, we're going to be adding increased intelligence through all of the channels really, so we can start to add more sophisticated language understanding and dialogue. So we can handle more human-like conversations, and so virtual assistants can behave really based on the subtlety of users' input, sentiment, or behavior. So some really exciting evolution of the solution through the coming year. We're pushed for time, so we'll probably sort of move on from there, but we'll follow up from this event and talk a little bit more about some of those exciting roadmap features as we move through this webinar series. It's also been really well received by analysts, and we're really proud of the fact that the analysts that follow this space and really understand the space of customer service and conversational AI and intelligent assistants and voice biometrics are really being very positive about the progress we've made already. Importantly, we've won about 45 Stevie Awards for customer service based on the great deployments our customers, you, have made, and the brand experience transformation that's made using our solutions. But also analysts like Forrester in their new wave of conversational AI for customer service, we were rewarded with the strongest current offering, and a lot of Fortune 500 companies contribute to Forrester's thinking there, and they were interviewed and collectively agreed that deployments of our conversational AI have really markedly improved the customer experience for their brand. And we've outpaced all of the other vendors in the space that Forrester assessed. So that's really a superlative result in terms of Forrester, but also with Opus and other analysts, we've seen significant results in a similar way. That's putting us at the lead in the field really in this space. So really exciting, we're really proud and quite humbled by that. But of course, it's really down to you and the deployments that you're making with our technology. And so just really to close, I'd like to say we're really excited. We're really excited to be your partner for the future. This age of digital transformation, reacting to change in our businesses has never demanded more from us. We're proud to be a partner that can really help you to execute on that change and really use what are innovative and complex technologies, but make them really work in a real fashion, deliver real value to your customers, the end consumers we all serve. Because in the end, that's really what we're all looking for. It's the only real result. In the end, you know, when you're sort of walking through the journey of rescuing children from a cave, the end result is pretty clear. You set the bar at really one child wanting to be rescued, but when all of them come out, that's fantastic. So in customer service terms, you know, we're looking for every customer to have a great experience working with the brands and your brands in the market, so that actually your businesses grow, win and retain loyal customers as a result. So thank you very much indeed, and I'll hand back to Scott and we'll handle some questions now as well.
Okay, thanks, Seb. We've only got a few minutes left here, but a ton of questions have come in, and I've tried to summarize, I think, the key themes around some of these questions. The first question, not surprising, is about COVID-19. People are asking for ideas and solutions and thoughts around, in the customer care sense, how organizations can take some of the principles we talked about today and apply them to their own context. I'm going to hand it to Brett and Seb to both take a crack at this. The first thing I would say, though, is this. Interestingly, in the last few weeks, my team and I in EMEA in India here, we've been talking a lot about this. And I know a lot of the account teams are out there working with their customers, looking for ways to find solutions. I think first and foremost is automation. A lot of the time we spend time looking at ways to automate to get a better return on investment. And we're factoring in the cost of people sometimes, but often we don't factor in the availability of data of labor. And I think when things like this happen, you realize how precious life is and how quickly something like this can bring down a workforce. And I think it's important to put solutions in there to automate so that you do have a plan B when and if these things happen like they are now, or if they happen again. So Brett, why don't you, sure, I don't know if I'm handling that, but go ahead.
Thanks, thanks, Scott. So we're going to answer this question jointly with Seb. As you can imagine, my response is going to be very heavily focused on the risk, mitigating risk side of the equation, given that my expertise is security and biometrics. And the one thing, and it's a very unfortunate thing, but the one thing that occurs in these unusual situations is that malicious individuals take advantage. So whenever there's change in process, change in operating procedures, think about a contact center. Potentially, you're going to have to ask all of your agents to work from home. And that will be a significant change in how they operate in their day-to-day jobs. You can be assured that, unfortunately, the malicious elements in our society will try to take advantage of that. And so the key thing is to think about how do you mitigate for that, how do you plan for that in advance, knowing that that is a potential or actually a likely outcome for your contact center operations. And so the use of biometrics, for example, can be used not only to authenticate callers that call into your contact center, but they can also be used to validate the identities of your agents to make sure that malicious individuals don't try to pretend to be agents that are interacting on your behalf. So that's just one concrete example. Obviously, we could go through a list of others. but it's really to, well, what my recommendation is to sit back, think about all the potential outcomes that COVID-19 could impact your organization, and how jointly we can work together to address some of those risks, knowing full well that malicious individuals will try to take advantage of that. So,
what I'd add to that is, pretty clear given the subjects we've just discussed is if we look at the agility of channels, I mean, we're already doing what we need to do in a way. Just to what extent we're doing it, I think is to be debated for COVID-19. A lot of businesses still today require someone to go into a physical location to get service or access service, a branch location, for example, or a store. But of course, that's digitizing fast. So accelerating the pace of that obviously makes a huge amount of sense. That's not something you can do in a short term. But also, a lot of those processes that are happening digitally today still require escalation to a physical point of a meeting point. And I think that's where we can really help. So technologies like messaging and how we get the experts really to the customer. So digital feels a lot more human and it feels populated. I think it's going to be really important. So we can start to figure out how to bring the right expertise, but also thinking about it from the operational standpoint. Running a contact center is bringing together a huge number of people into a single location. So things like enabling remote working. So all of our agent consoles for our messaging platform, for example, are all web-based. So in principle, we can provide working from home capability to large swathes, if not all of the agents or advisors working in a contact center on our technology. I think that's key. So working from home but offering exactly the same service to the end consumer so they don't perceive the change is really the win-win that we're looking for, in the same way that we as enterprises are all working from home and trying to keep up appearances in terms of the service we're providing to everyone around us.
Yeah, I was just thinking very quickly, right? So the third principle that you had talked about, right, which is making agents, trusted advisors. I can just imagine that, that may be even more necessary, right? Given that potentially people won't have the ability to walk into a branch and speak to a financial advisor or to debate a charge on a telecom bill, and so the agents could potentially become just even more necessary, right, to continue the business's operations. So.
Well, not only that, but also managing disparate agents working from home is not the same as working in a pod around a group of desks and being able to see what people are or aren't doing consistently well or are doing badly. So using capabilities like agent AI, you start to get that feedback and training loop much more rapidly applied, even though you can't actually see exactly what they're doing minute to minute, but the technology is actually assisting them in that way, and it's effectively providing some degree of monitoring, but in a positive way. It's suggesting and advising them to do the right thing based on what a good example looks like, what an expert does in that space. So as remote working takes hold in the contact center, agent AI is going to have a significant part to play in that.
Agreed. So Scott, you mentioned that there are other questions.
Yeah, there's one more question. We're almost out of time here, and I think this is more for you, Brett, but feel free to weigh in. This conference started as a UK only, now it's moved really to an EMEA-wide event. So we're having some questions in from outside of the UK, and one of the predominant questions I've seen a few variations of this, is voice biometrics has taken hold in the UK extremely well. Most of the big banks have that or some form of it, and as do some of the telcos, the government, et cetera, as you mentioned before. Why has it not taken off in some of the other big markets in Europe? Is it down to standards? Is it down to privacy, GDPR? Is there a way to generalize or be specific about some of the larger markets?
Yeah, Scott, one thing, and I don't want to make this statement sound like an overgeneralization. I do realize that every country has its own specificities in Europe, but I would say that one common thread that I've seen in several countries, which is definitely the case in countries such as France or Germany or Spain, often a customer that calls into the contact center and is unable to authenticate using the legacy means is asked to go into a branch. Or if a customer calls into the contact center and wants to perform a very high-risk transaction, they're unable to do so and is told to go into a branch. And so what we've seen in the UK and in other markets such as Canada and the United States, forcing the customer to go into a branch is perceived as something that you just cannot do. And so the need to be able to service customers in the contact center, even if they're unable to provide a alphanumeric password, or even in the situations where they're performing high-risk transactions, is very much present, which has led to a lot of fraudulent activity. And so I think this question actually relates to the previous questions, right? So if in countries such as Italy, Spain, Germany, and France, if there is a situation where there is an inability to go into branches, then organizations will need to be in a position where they can perform these high-risk transactions, even in the contact center. And so biometrics, the good news is that with Gatekeeper, so again, connecting to our discussions earlier, we have the ability to deliver these solutions extremely rapidly. So, so I don't want organizations that are currently on the webinar with us to think that this is a 6-month project that will come too late. This is something that we can react to very, very quickly.
There's often a tendency to focus on the high-risk transactions, which can be an edge case as well, but it's the small friction, which I think sometimes people forget every day. So I hear from Spain, and we're seeing it here in the UK more and more, when you make payments online, you start to get a text message to verify your ID based on your device, for example, and people are starting to react less than positively against that. It can be difficult. It's small friction, but a little bit like going from putting in a PIN to using your thumbprint or using a biometric. It's a small incremental step that people value and then don't like when you're stepping backwards in friction terms. So, and that's for every transaction, right? We're starting to see this friction, which is good.
Okay, well, listen, thanks, guys. This marks the end of the webinar. A couple quick things before we go. Firstly, as I said earlier, this will be posted to our website and be posted to all of you. So for those of your colleagues who couldn't make it, please feel free to share that. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier as well, we will have a rolling thunder approach to these webinars. We don't have the dates and or customers fixed yet, but it won't be too long in the future where we will have that fixed, and then we will make you a bit aware of those events when they get scheduled. And lastly, I'd just like to thank everyone. I think it's been a great session. Again, we put this together talking about Agile and scenario planning and Plan Bs and all that. We didn't expect to do this a week ago, and here we are doing it. I think it went pretty well. So thanks everyone for participating, sending in the questions. We'll answer as many as we can, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.